I love to travel. I always have. Whether it's a year in the capital city of Beijing, China, or 2 months on my own exploring in Thailand or India, or an afternoon with my son in Lowell, walking along old industrial canals and gazing at factories. I love it. I love it. So I think it was preordained that I would end up a Unitarian Universalist. For if we have a shared theology today, I'm willing to bet that it's what I'm going to call the theology of the journey. A Unitarian Universalist minister recently articulated this to me. He said, Unitarian Universalist congregations are a support group of people on individual journeys towards ultimate ends, such as truth, harmony, and love. I decided to test this idea that we Unitarian Universalists, or UUs as we often call ourselves, have a shared theology of the journey. As all good scientists do, I Googled. And when I Googled, page after page of links to UU church websites came up, all with some variation of the statement, wherever you are on your spiritual journey, you are welcome here. No other phrase that I Googled came close. Now, this theology of the journey gives us a connective thread in our worship and in our conversation, but I'm going to be a little bit heretical. This theology is not enough. In fact, the pervasive nature of the journey metaphor has a downside as well, particularly when it's time for healing. In that time, more organic, nature-related ways of looking at and talking about our lives can be profoundly helpful, both personally and communally. For as we know, metaphors not only reflect our thinking and our experience, but they also organize our thinking and experience. They can spark new possibilities, but at the same time, their structure and content can blind us as well to certain areas. Now, it's no wonder that the journey is so prominent in our spiritual conversation. For one thing, the story of the heroic quest, the archetypal journey, is the paramount Western storyline, according to the famous scholar Joseph Campbell. In the archetypal journey that he described, a hero leaves the world he knows and travels to a different world in search of something. He encounters supernatural powers, engages in battle, and eventually gains what he's looking for. Often, he then returns, always changed, to the world from which he had set out. Think Gilgamesh, Ulysses, Luke Skywalker, Frodo. This journey metaphor sits deep in our collective psyche. My own sense, though, is that it's especially important when we are in places from which we must escape, situations when freedom is our most intense felt need. Situations, for example, of physical coercion, such as child abuse, domestic violence, slavery, or situations of emotional coercion, where we are engulfed by another person's ego or will. I used to lead a support group for survivors of domestic violence in a nearby town. We gathered every Wednesday morning, and I always began with a reading. Over the months, one reading moved nearly every survivor in the group to tears. One woman told us it was her story. It had helped her imagine what she could do. Some of you may be familiar with this poem, The Journey by Mary Oliver. One day, you finally knew what you had to do and began, though the voices around you kept shouting their bad advice, and you felt the old tug at your ankles. Mend my life, each voice cried, but you didn't stop. It was already late enough, and a wild night, and the road full of fallen branches and stones. But little by little, as you left their voices behind, the stars began to burn through the sheets of clouds, and there was a new voice, which you slowly recognized as your own, which kept you company as you strode deeper and deeper into the world, determined to do the only thing you could do, determined to save the only life you could save. This poem and the story, to me, illustrate how seeing life as a journey can be incredibly powerful and is closely linked to escape and freedom. And this linkage Also, it helps us understand why the journey figures so prominently in our Unitarian Universalist spiritual imagination. For our Unitarian tradition, in particular, unfolded with a dominant focus on individual freedom and conscience, especially in the early 1800s as it differentiated itself from conservative Christianity. And today, we still cherish, we deeply cherish, individual freedom as a core value. For example, in contrast to many faith traditions, none of you will ever have to say yes to a creed in order to join this congregation or any other Unitarian Universalist congregation. Furthermore, one of our 7 principles, our Unitarian Universalist 7 principles, declares the absolute right of individual conscience. This means that anyone has a right to dissent from anything. And finally, we still proudly call ours the free faith. Freedom is a rich and a central part of our Unitarian Universalist identity, and this value anchors our theology of the journey. But it's not enough by itself. Reverend Wayne Muller tells a story about a woman who had been on a quest for meaning her whole life. He met her at a retreat and described her as a spiritual seeker who had traveled to sacred sites, attended retreats and workshops, and sought teachers and guides. It had, she confessed to him, been a time of much striving. It had been fruitful, yet she felt tired. "You have been a seeker for so long," he told her. "Why not become a finder?" Why not become a finder? What holds us back from becoming finders? Sometimes, I think it's as simple as the habit of seeing ourselves as always on a journey in life. Our imagination can then develop tunnel vision, and it focuses us always on the horizon and steers us into perpetual motion. Finding can elude us. I'm sure there are many other factors that hold us back as well. Surely one is our modern sense that all spiritual knowledge is tentative and partial. This can leave us feeling resigned or content to move about sampling the different dishes throughout the banquet hall, but never to take a seat at one table. Some of us are only jarred out of this journey viewpoint of always seeking but never really finding when we become desperate. Several years ago, my sister died a hard death. It came not long after 2 other deaths in my immediate family. And 1 month after my sister's death, I literally came to a stop. I just couldn't go anywhere. What's more, as I looked around from my stopping place, I realized that in all my journeying, I hadn't traveled nearly as far as I thought I had. I still had only a weak faith in the world, no real faith in the sacred. I was still learning to commit myself deeply enough to a faith community so that I could learn its slow lessons about loving better. And I still lived with personal relationships distorted by my reactivity, anger, and anxiety. I was stuck. And where I was stuck, it looked like a desert. I needed to become a finder then, a finder of some meaning and gifts in the griefs that I could not escape from. Now, this experience of mine, of running into a wall and needing to find healing, suggested to me that when we need healing, we need a theology that values not simply escape or the journey, but values the place we already are, the place we actually are, the place we are rooted, our particular knot in the vast net of the universe. Thich Nhat Hanh, a Vietnamese Buddhist, put it well. In his book on general Buddhist doctrines, he reminds us that when animals are hurt, they do 4 things. They stop, they lie down, they rest, and they heal. For humans, stopping allows us to assess and cultivate what will heal us. And what will heal us is our relationships with ourselves, with other people, with the sacred. these relationships are not strengthened on the run, then we can be hampered by our own motion and can't see them. These relationships are not strengthened when we focus on our individual journeys and our own personal freedom. Then we can be blinded by the centrality of our ego in the storyline. And thus, we never fully attend to the far more important tasks of tending the relationships that in truth define and sustain us. We humans are only fully human in relationship.